everyone who's here, thank you so much for your patience. We had some technical difficulties, but we are very glad to be here up and running. We're very thankful for Evan to be joining us. He's going to read his book, answer some questions, and we're going to talk all things manatees. This will be recorded, so whether you're watching this live or the recording, thank you so much for being here. So let's get started. I don't know, Evan, if you want to say a few things about yourself before you read your book.
Hey everybody. Thank you for being here. If you're watching live or catching the recording later, I want to say thank you to you, Stephanie, and to the team at the Save the Manatee Club for setting this up and hosting me. It's a pretty cool full circle moment for me because when I was writing Manatee Summer, I had to do quite a bit of research to kind of become a bit of a manatee expert enough to write these characters who are kind of manatee experts. And the Save the Manatee Club website and the newsletters and the resources that y'all put out were super helpful for me, super inspiring for me. So just a big fan of all that you guys are doing. And there's actually a fictional conservation organization in the book called the Florida Manatee Society, but partly inspired by the Save the Manatee Club. So just really glad to be here and really glad to connect with y'all. I'm going to start off with a short reading from my book Manatee Summer, which is a middle grade novel. So it's for young readers, ages roughly kind of 8 to 13, although I like to say it's great for readers of all ages, including adults. So I'm going to read the first chapter, which is very, very short, and then I'll read an excerpt from the second chapter, so starting right at the beginning. All right, chapter 1. Pawpaw's Manatee story goes like this. When he was a kid, way before he met Nana, and way before I even existed, he used to take his dad's canoe out into the Indigo River, hoping to catch some fish to fry. His family didn't have much money, so he wanted to help out. And one day, instead of fish, Pawpaw found a manatee. He gave up on fishing and followed the manatee down the river, away from town, into a cove ringed with palm trees. It was a cloudy day, but when the sun came out, Pawpaw saw another manatee swimming near the canoe, and then another, and another, until he realized there was a whole herd of manatees in the cove. Pawpaw sat there for hours till sunset, while the manatees puttered around his canoe. He says it was one of the most magical days of his life. He says that sitting there watching them, he felt peaceful, like he didn't have anywhere else to be. Like it didn't matter what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. Like for a little while at least, everything was okay. I love the story, but I also love the way Pawpaw tells it. The way he smiles his crooked smile and waggles his bushy eyebrows when he describes the manatees as big gray blobs. I love his voice too. It's the deepest voice I've ever heard, like he's drawing it up from the bottom of the sea, like each word is a sunken treasure. But ever since Pawpaw got a kind of dementia called Alzheimer's, his manatee story has been changing. He takes away certain parts. He adds others. Now he says that he stayed with them past sunset till the stars came out. He says that the manatees danced and somersaulted in the water. I don't know if I believe that bit about the somersaults, though. Honestly, I don't know if I believe any of it anymore. I've never seen a cove ringed with palm trees, and I've biked a whole lot of the Indigo River coast. I've never seen a manatee either, even though they're supposed to live in the river, and I've been looking for them for basically my whole life, aka 11 years. I want to believe Pawpaw's story. I want to hold on to it, but it feels like trying to hold on to a wave at the beach the way I did when I was little and didn't know any better. I'd stand waist deep in the ocean and dig my toes into the sand, and when a wave reached the shore, I'd try to wrap my arms around it, but it always slipped away. One time, it even carried me with it. I lost my footing and my whole world turned to water, and for a few seconds there was no up, no down, no sky or sand, just me spinning in the darkness until Pawpaw's hand found mine. Chapter 2. There, I say, pointing to a speckled lizard racing along the bank of the canal. Tommy squats for a closer inspection. Brown and Knoll, he says, discovery number 22. He pushes his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Peter, I estimate there's a 78% chance we've run out of lizard species native to Central Florida. I scowl. You're a non-believer. But I believe in lots of things, says Tommy, like gravity and chlorophyll. Chloro what? Chlorophyll, it's the pigment in plants that makes them green. He's talking fast now, the way he always does when he gets going about a new word he just learned. I was listening to a Science Daily podcast about the plant reproductive cycle. Good grief, Tommy, I say, sponging the sweat off my face with my shirt. It's the first day of summer vacation, and the sun must know it too because it's hot, even for Florida. It's one of those days when your skin stings and the pavement looks all blurry, and it's so humid you feel like someone just threw a big, wet blanket over you. It's hard to get enough oxygen, and you definitely don't want to breathe with your mouth open because there are about 1 gazillion mosquitoes buzzing around your head, and the air is thick with the smell of dead catfish wafting up from the Indigo River. The road scorches my bare feet, so Tommy and I stick to the grassy bank of the canal that runs into our neighborhood from the river. Well, I stick to the bank. Tommy keeps his distance. He's been scared of water ever since spring break, when he got caught in a rip current at the beach, and his dad, a risk analyst, told him there was a 7% chance he could have been swept right out to sea and drowned. Sunscreen, Tommy says, pulling a bottle out of one of the pockets of his cargo shorts. It's SPF 100, that's the highest SPF. I wave the bottle away. You know I hate that stuff. But Peter, remember last summer when we were out in the sun all day and you didn't wear sunscreen and you burned and then peeled for a whole week? No, I say, even though I totally do remember. My skin aches just thinking about it. While Tommy smears a thick coat of sunscreen on his arms and legs, I keep looking for animals. Our neighborhood curls like a horseshoe around the canal, and there are usually lots of birds and reptiles down here by the water. Tommy says the canal is like its own little ecosystem, another word he learned from Science Daily. A sudden flash of red in the branches of an oak tree catches my eye. Binoculars, I say. Tommy scrambles to hand them over. I zoom in on the spot of red, then sigh. Red-winged blackbird, I say. Discovery number 72, says Tommy, rubbing sunscreen on his cheeks. The tricky thing about discoveries is that the more you make, the harder it is to make new ones. Still, this is it. This summer, our last summer before middle school, Tommy and I will finally finish our discovery journal. I know it. I can feel it. 3 long months ahead of us and only 6 discoveries to go. So I'm going to skip a few pages here because I want to get ahead to where a manatee enters this story. So I'll just read a little bit from later in the chapter. What you're missing in between is that Peter and Tommy have an encounter with the mean neighbor, Mr. Riley, that Peter calls his arch nemesis. So I'm skipping past that, and now Peter and Tommy are sitting on the banks of the canal that runs through their neighborhood. Peter, look, says Tommy. I scan the canal until I see it, a gray lump floating a few yards away from where we're sitting. It disappears under the water, then pops back up a few seconds later. If I had to make a guess, says Tommy, I'd say that's a manatee, I whisper. A breeze stirs the reeds in the shallows and prickles the back of my neck as I crawl on my hands and knees to the water's edge. The manatee sinks and rises again, and this time its head breaks the water just for a second. A big whiskery snout with 2 nostrils and 2 beady black eyes. My heart is flitting like the wings of the ruby-throated hummingbird, aka discovery number 54. I remind myself to breathe because sometimes when I get really excited, I hold my breath so long my chest starts to ache and I almost die. Journal, I say. Tommy hands it over and I flip to a fresh page. At the top, I write discovery number 95, manatee. Then I start sketching. What are all those white lines on its back? I say, real quiet so I don't scare it away. Tommy scoots forward the tiniest bit. Maybe every manatee has a unique pattern, the way every giraffe has a unique set of spots. That's just a hypothesis, though. We sit there for a little while, shoulder to shoulder, me studying the manatee and sketching on the left page of the journal, Tommy jotting down notes and observations and questions on the right. The sun beats down like it's trying to bake us. There's a 12% chance we're about to get heat stroke, Tommy says, but I don't care because manatees are real. I know that sounds silly. Of course manatees are real, but until this moment, I wasn't really sure. I couldn't really know. And if manatees are real, maybe Papa's story is real too. I will stop there.
Thank you. That was so wonderful. So while we wait for some people to kind of submit some questions, so my question for you is, I know you mentioned to me you grew up in Florida. Do you have like a special manatee story from, I don't know, your childhood or something that inspired all of this?
Yeah, so this story actually started with, it was kind of rooted in my own childhood memories of sometimes going down to the banks of the canal that ran into my neighborhood when I was a kid. I lived in the Indian River Lagoon area, in the kind of Cocoa Beach area. And there were often several manatees that would hang out in that canal that flowed through our neighborhood. And so I had these warm memories of going down to the water and just kind of sitting there in the grass and watching them just sort of rise and fall through the water and munch all the seagrass along the bottom of the canal bed. And I remember just being really, really intrigued, really fascinated by them. I think really drawn to the idea of these like, gentle giants, just like how massive they were, but how sort of slow and peaceful they were as well. So it all kind of grew out of that for me, even though, as I said, I did have to do quite a bit of research to know what I needed to know in order to write the book.
Oh, yeah, we love the Indian River Lagoon. We have a lot of work that we do out there, conservation work, to help restore the seagrass. I know you mentioned to me that there's an organization in your book that you kind of modeled after Save the Manatee Club. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So what happens in this story is this is not an experience that I had in childhood, but Peter and Tommy, the two boys that you just heard about, end up discovering an injured manatee in the canal. And it's not much of a spoiler because this happens pretty early in the story, but as they figure out how to report that injury and how to get that manatee help, they end up connecting with a local organization called the Florida Manatee Society, which is fictional. And Peter ends up kind of really bonding with a young wildlife biologist and conservationist who's working at the center named Cassidy. And she kind of becomes a mentor and kind of older sister for him throughout the book. And through her, he learns a lot about the plight of manatees, the threats that they're facing in the wild, and what's being done to protect them. I won't spoil too much later in the book, but he ends up working with this organization in some exciting ways.
Oh, that's awesome. So we do have a question. So someone said, what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was, as I said, it really grew out of exploring my own childhood memories. This story actually started as a really short poem that I wrote. I was responding to this poetry prompt in this writing group that I was a part of, where we were given 5 minutes to write a poem based on a childhood memory. And 5 minutes is not a lot of time. And the point is that you don't overthink it too much. You kind of go with what pops into your head first. And the first childhood memory that came to mind was watching the manatees in the water. And I hadn't thought about it in a long time consciously. And so this memory came back to me, and I wrote this short poem. And it was almost like writing that poem kind of reactivated the memory for me. And I just kept thinking about it. I kept thinking about how cool it was that I grew up in Florida where you can see manatees, because I've lived in a lot of different places around the country since then, and manatees do not live all over the country, and it's something really special about Florida's ecosystem. And so I ended up kind of adapting that poem, using that poem as inspiration for a short story. I wrote like a 10-page story where I invented these two characters, Peter and Tommy. And I thought that short story would be the end of it, but the story just kept kind of growing and evolving in my mind. And so I just kept writing scene after scene. And eventually I was like, I think I have a novel length idea on my hands. So that's kind of how it took shape.
That's really cool. Do you have any advice for anyone who wants to be a writer or is inspired by manatees or any other animals?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate lately to get to meet with a lot of like do author visits, school visits, especially in Florida, because the book is set there, and there are always so many writers in the room. When I ask like who here likes writing stories, right? Who here likes writing in any form? Like so many young people are writing, which is super exciting. And I always just tell them that like I started writing when I was their age. I started writing when I was in like elementary school, really. And I was a huge reader. I think reading, reading as much as you can, reading voraciously is a huge part of being a writer. It's a huge part of growing as a writer. And it's also just about writing. It's about finding the things that you love writing, right? Because sometimes like we have this association that the writing we're doing when we're in school is like not really what we want to be doing. Maybe we don't love our assignments, but as a writer, you get to choose what you write about. So picking something that you're really passionate about is going to make it so much more engaging for you. And it also means that that thing that you're writing about, you're going to have to learn more about it, and you're going to satisfy your own curiosity about it as you're writing about it. And so if you're somebody who loves manatees, if you're somebody who loves maybe a different kind of animal or just animals in general or the natural world, these are all things that you can write about your love and your passion for these things in stories. And you can also, by writing stories about these things, like encourage yourself to learn more about them and become more knowledgeable.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly share. So something that kind of also kind of sparked my interest in part of what I get to do here at Save the Manatee Club is review books. Is actually when I was a kid. I have a very long history of manatees, but I, in high school, wrote a children's book about my story about how I was inspired by manatees. So any way to connect with other writers and especially people who care about manatees is just super exciting for me. We do have another question come in. So, what is the most difficult part, or what have you found is the most difficult part of writing?
Oh gosh. I think it's like whatever part I'm actively working on feels like the most difficult part of the process to me. But I would say, I think that often just getting the first draft down is the most challenging part for me. It's like facing the blank page. Um, and this is something that I think surprises a lot of kids when I talk to them about the writing process, is that like 95% of the work of writing is revision. And so, it is okay and understandable that a first draft of any story, of any new idea is going to be super messy, super rough. And I think that one of the most challenging things for me is like allowing that to happen and kind of asking my like inner perfectionist to step aside so I can get that first draft down and know that I will have like the time and space and support to improve the story later. But I have to have something to work with, right? So there has to be a starting place. And I think that's the most challenging sometimes.
Yeah. So, do you want to tell us about kind of what you're working on now? I know I've seen, I guess Manatee Summer was recently translated. It has a really cool cover, but if you want to tell us about what you have going on now, that would be great.
Yeah, I can briefly I have the Japanese edition of Manatee Summer here. So this is the cover. Which is really exciting. When a book is translated, it doesn't always get a new cover design, but it did in this case. And so I love the original cover, and it's really cool to see this new version as well. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to reach back here and grab. I just had a book come out yesterday, a new nonfiction book for young readers. This is different than Manatee Summer. It's not a novel. It's nonfiction, and it is fully illustrated. So it's like a picture book. But it tells the true story of two environmental heroes of mine, Olas and Marty Murray, who were husband and wife. They were married, but they were also partners in wildlife biology and in conservation work. And so this is the story of their adventures in some of the most kind of remote and wild places on the planet, and also how that translated into these amazing conservation careers. And so I really hope that it might, inspire kids to think about what to do with the love of nature. Like, how do you turn that into action? I'm also currently I'm always working on several projects at once, and publishing moves very, very slowly. So the things that I'm actively working on day to day right now will not be published until probably 2026 or beyond. So I know it's a long time to keep, if I mention it, to keep it in your head, but I'm writing a book this is another nonfiction book about the colony of over 1 million bats that roost beneath a bridge in downtown Austin, Texas, which is where I live. So another wildlife story, and I'm working on a new middle grade novel as well.
Cool. Well, I'm excited about the bat book. I've been to Austin and seen the bats. We did get another question. So, what kind of research did you do to prepare before writing about manatees?
Yeah, so I had these like childhood memories that kind of provided the seeds of the story, but I was writing about these two boys who were like animal nerds. Like, they love learning about animals, they do a lot of research, and so in order to write them, I had to kind of get on their level. I had to kind of know what they would know. So I started by just doing a lot of internet research. I poured through like every part of the Save the Manatee Club website, signed up for your newsletter, just started getting sort of all of that information coming in regularly, reading updates and news stories about what was happening with manatees in Florida. This was back in, I was writing this in like 2019, 2020, 2019 mostly. I also called a few manatee rehabilitation centers and interviewed some like wildlife biologists and kind of manatee caretakers who worked at those facilities to find out more about what they did. And then I returned to Florida for a research trip and visited some rehabilitation centers, which was important because there are some scenes in the book that take place at one of those types of centers. And one of the kind of animal refuges that I wrote about that has one of these centers was based on a visit I did to Homosassa Springs State Park. So yeah, I had a really fun research trip. I got to swim with manatees in the Crystal River while I was down there, which I never quite did that as a kid. So that was really cool to finally get to do that.
Very cool. So that looks like the last of our questions. So we'll just kind of wrap this up. I will mention in the chat, we do have a link to a coupon code. So we have our Manatee Store. All the money, again, is going to Save the Manatee Club to protect manatees and their habitat for future generations. But for everyone who's attending and watching this through the end of the month, we want to encourage reading as we are wrapping up summer. So we have 10% off all of our books, including Manatee Summer, in our collection. So I just want to say thank you so much. We are just so grateful to have you join us for this, and looking forward to hopefully working with you more in the future. And good luck. I don't know if you want to talk briefly about the award that you're nominated for, but
yeah. Well, first of all, I'll just say thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. This is really, really special for me. Thank you again to everybody tuning in or catching this later. I hope you enjoy the book if you're reading it or planning to read it. And yeah, the book is currently nominated for the Sunshine State Young Readers Award, which is it's a list that comes out annually that selects books that are recommended for young readers across the state of Florida. And given that I grew up in Florida and given that this story is set there, just really honored to have it recognized in Florida. The other books on the list are absolutely fantastic. I'm thrilled to be in their company, so you should check out all of the books on the nominated list. But yeah, just really, really excited and happy that the book is reaching readers in Florida, especially.
well, I just want to say thank you again before we end this stream. And also a quick reminder, we have International Manatee Day coming up on September 7th. So another fun day of we'll celebrate manatees. So Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah. Have a great day, everybody.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.